Again, with the breaking news from Israel, with the deepening turmoil there over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's move to limit the independence of the country's Supreme Court. Weeks and weeks of protests have led to this. You're looking at the scene outside the Israeli legislature. That's the Knesset in Jerusalem. And a new wave of protest erupted yesterday after the defense minister there was fired for calling for a delay in this plan until after Easter and Passover. This morning, labor unions called for a general strike, and the protests may have actually forced Netanyahu and his right-wing government to reconsider, or at least consider a pause. Charlie D'Agata is following this story from London. Charlie, good morning.
Good morning to you, Tony. Israel is bracing for further protests today, and the prime minister is facing the greatest threat yet to his coalition government. There are now reports that you mentioned he may halt that overhaul following a long night of nationwide demonstrations. Organizers.
This is pretty fucking wild. I mean, it's wild. Obviously, you can't have a conversation about Israel and internal politics within Israel without having a conversation about Israeli apartheid state conditions imposed upon the Palestinian population, which they control over land that they stole. The two go hand in hand, and it fits in this conversation as well. Okay, but if I were to, for a second, try to look at this as though Israel was not a violent theocratic ethno-state with that is, built on top of the Palestinian graves, it's obviously going to happen in the way that it has. Bibi Netanyahu is incredibly corrupt and has, not single-handedly, but has very deliberately made Israel even more right-wing. It's interesting to considering that, the Israeli nation-building project is an inherently reactionary one that was created by, colonialists that had no say, or should have had no say whatsoever on what gets divvied up to who in that land. But having said that, Netanyahu has been also uniquely right-wing, okay? And over the course of the past couple of decades, it has gotten to a point where the domestic politics of Israel that do not pertain to the Arab Israelis or the non-Israeli citizen Palestinians that also have to cohabitate these spaces, which they are, systemically discriminated from cohabitating. It's become so right-wing that even the liberals in Israel, which oftentimes have really reactionary perspectives as it pertains to dealing with Arab Israelis or even Palestinians in general, are very upset at the right-wing government. Why am I consistently talking about Palestinians in this conversation? Because that is the division that they utilize. Just like the right wing, if I were to talk about a comparison for Americans and American Jews that have maybe heard about Israel from their parents or whatever, it's a decent comparison to mention, even though it's not 100% analogous. But the right wing in America routinely weaponizes anti-black sentiment, okay? The systems itself are obviously very much not in favor of black liberation. It's designed in that way, so that much is permanent, okay? And the right-wing Israeli government weaponizes Palestinian existence in that exact same way. Of course, no matter what happens, obviously, if you were to make a comparison to the existence currently of Palestinians on Palestinian soil, if you were to make a comparison to black people living in U.S. soil, that would be I hate that we're doing oppression Olympics almost, but that would be more favorable. Okay? This does not undermine contemporary black existence in America, but the reality is that's how devastating it is for Palestinians and their everyday existence. Not having water supply, having all matter of their existence controlled by an apartheid state that is incredibly violent towards them. It's more akin to Jim Crow. Yes, that is only if we're talking about. I mean, in some ways, Jim Crow would be again, more favorable position for the Palestinians if there was like full-blown integration from where they're at right now. There are things that happen in Israeli occupied territory that would not have happened in even in the Jim Crow South. Okay? Like that is how devastating that existence is. And this is before we even talk about Gaza. Gaza is an open air prison. Okay? Gaza is an open air prison. It's the largest open air prison on the planet. It gets routinely bombed. There's no comparison to it currently on the planet. More akin to indigenous genocide. On the one hand, I'm glad to see many Israelis protesting their far-right governments that tend to turn Israel into a dictatorship. On the other hand, I wonder where all the protests were over West Bank Palestinians living under Israeli dictatorship for over 50 years. The Israeli dictatorship now, domestically speaking, is trying to undermine the Israeli Supreme Court. That's what's going on. For those of you who are not caught up on why these protests are happening in Israel, it's because since this formation of the Netanyahu government, which featured some of the most insanely far right, some of the most insanely fucking far right members that were considered terrorists by the Israeli government originally, like Ben Gvir, okay? Netanyahu has united literally some of the most reactionary, fascist, supremacist terrorists in his coalition. Part of their goal was to basically undermine the Supreme Court to ensure that they can get away with like whatever kind of legislation they want to get away with. Some of these guys are like anti-LGBT. Some of these guys are anti-miscegenation. A lot of these guys are anti-miscegenation. The Kahanas were considered terrorists even by U.S. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And now, the defense minister spoke out against it and was immediately fired. And you got the police chief and all these other Israelis like immediately creating, mobilizing and creating a mass movement in Israel, which led to the Netanyahu government. Miscegenation is race mixing. Yes. Are there Israeli activists fighting for Palestine? Of course there are. There are. There are plenty of also American Jews that are fighting for Palestinian rights and Palestinian liberation. And there are, of course, Israeli activists that are fighting for Palestinian rights and liberation as well. The unfortunate problem is that it's not as commonplace and it's not as popular a movement. Even within the ranks of the Israeli left, it's what I would liken it to is basically like America's existing imperialist affairs in both Iraq, Afghanistan, and numerous parts of the Middle East, and the supposed leftists in America that are left-wing for every other purpose with the exception of America's war on the global south. That's it. It's damn near identical. Okay? It is very, very far right. with its treatment of Palestinians is incredibly reactionary. One of the most reactionary formations. Here's Noam Chomsky
It's worse
talking about what's going on in Israel.
than apartheid. I've never called it apartheid because it's worse than apartheid. South Africa depended on its black population.
I've heard Noam Chomsky say this before.
85% of the population. They were the workforce. They needed them. South Africa tried actually to get the Bantustans to be recognized, try to make them look viable. Israel doesn't do that with the Palestinians in the occupied territories. Just wants to get rid of them.
Yeah. I love it. As soon as Noam Chomsky comes up, what's the genocide that Noam Chomsky denies for some inexplicable reason? Like, suck my fucking dick, dude. Seriously. You didn't even hear anything he said. You just immediately saw Noam Chomsky and went to the fucking talking points. I absolutely love that shit, dude. Love it. Like, there is no one. No one can ever fucking speak out against, like, the mainstream narrative, especially as it pertains to anything about our allies or about our sister nation state of Israel or America's allies or countries that are doing countries that are doing the goal united, aligned with the United States of America. If it's on board, if it's our foreign policy, you cannot ever speak out against it. If you ever speak out against it, people will literally constantly weaponize anything and everything in the most cynical, deploy it in the most cynical capacity. Okay? It is so fucking stupid. I think it's a way lower percentage of the comparison you made about leftist Americans speaking out against the war. Yes, because there's never going to be a one-to-one comparison because it's literally both like the treatment of black people in the Jim Crow South while also simultaneously active war against them. And not in the way that like there have been firebombing campaigns in like, fucking Philadelphia in 1985 or the bombing of Black Wall Street in Tulsa. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking like literally everyday existence. If everyday existence was like Tulsa, non-fucking stop. It's like Jim Crow and Trail of Tears all together. Exactly. It's like it's difficult to talk about this because it's so complex. Stop lying. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm lying. As an Israeli, I will say we are brainwashed since birth. I think all Arabs around us, with no exception, want to demolish all of us because we are Jewish. So that's why so many Israelis think they save us when they go to the IDF or bomb Gaza, etc. Yes, it's incredibly powerful propaganda from birth. Okay, it's also tied to a very real and understandable fear that is existential about ethnic cleansing of Jews. Because of the history of Judaism, because of the history of Jewish people throughout society being constantly and consistently blamed for all of society's problems, okay? Whether it be pogroms or whether it be, obviously, the Holocaust, there is a very real existential fear that is taught and also it's learned from and it's an understandable one too, that is learned from an early age. And it is being very cynically weaponized by those in positions of power in the Israeli government. Okay? That's what makes it the most effective kind of propaganda. Does that make sense? Because there's truth to it.
We begin today's show looking at the growing political crisis in Israel. Workers across Israel are taking part in a general strike today to protest plans by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to disempower Israel's judiciary.
I know you read my last
chat.
Turn
Israel into a dictatorship.
Oh, fuck you. My biggest fear as a Jew is the top of the hour ad break. Oh, good job. Okay, well, we're going to listen to wonderful Amy Goodman, my queen, talk about Israel and Palestine and the Israeli protests intensifying over Netanyahu's government weakening judiciary as Palestinian rights are ignored. Obviously, if you no longer want to see those ads, you can ignore them. You can watch them. They're 3 minutes long. Or you can ignore them successfully by subscribing for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account through Twitch account, you get one free Prime subscription a month. Are you pro-Palestine? Yes, of course I am pro-Palestine. What the fuck kind of take is that? Anyway. What do you think is more likely? Palestinians getting their land back or a Kurdish nation state? An independent Kurdish state? Independent Kurdish state would be helpful to American interests in the region. And it would be literally created by the Americans in general. It would be a puppet state. So, yes, it would be, the independent Kurdish state would be infinitely more likely than Palestinians getting their land back. That still doesn't change the reality, though, that even that is unlikely because Turkey would freak the fuck out. Every other nation state would freak the fuck out in the region because you got to cut it from other countries' lands. And America doesn't have that level of like imperial control. Like they have it over Iraq, and they did northern Iraq as like a Kurdish formation. Anyway, I forgot to run the ad break here. I'm going to run it now. Do you support a two-state solution? No, I'm a one-stater. I used to be a two-stater. I think that the two-state solution is like 100% just the two-state solution is just, it's laughable. People have been using it and cynically deploying it like fucking talking about police reform. That's what I liken it to. Now, of course, the unfortunate consequence is that like it's infinitely, it's even more impossible. Okay? It's even more impossible to have a one-state solution. It's impossible to have a two-state solution either. But yes, a one-state solution with reparations afforded to Palestinian people for all of the crimes that they were subjected to, offering land back, viable land back to Palestinian citizens that the land was stolen from, and then having a one nation side by side, which would be impossible to do without like a genuine international, serious international interference. Your average Israeli's greatest fear is the single state solution. They're terrified of demographic shifts. Yes, absolutely. I know. Jewish 22-year-old trying to learn more about Israel-Palestine from a non-propaganda view. Can you explain what you mean by Palestinians getting their land back? Thanks. Yes. In 1948, there was a thing called the Nakba. This was the most important, leading up to that moment, it was just mostly just immigration into the region from, British colonists, okay? But what that was basically the Great Purge. During the process, there was a lot of land that was either A, stolen, or B, bought by developers and people who held on to a lot of Palestinian land that was given to Jewish settlers, okay? What is basically happening in Jerusalem was happening in Palestine as a whole. That was the Israeli nation development project from the jump. That is also part of the reason why Israel has always consistently turned a blind eye to the atrocities of settler terrorism in areas that they are not supposed to be in, okay? And over the course of the multiple years, the multiple decades that the Netanyahu government has been in operation, they have turned a blind eye and then excused and then supported and single-handedly defended and offered material help to the settler terrorism, the atrocities of settler terrorism. Okay? I got to do something real quick.
The strike has shut down Israel's two main seaports. Flights have been suspended at Israel's Ben Gurion airport. The strike has also shut down schools, banks, and other institutions. Over the weekend, hundreds of thousands of Israelis took part in protests. Many blocked roads and highways, shutting down large parts of the country.
IP is a multi-generational Israel-Palestine is a multi-generational historic divide. I highly doubt a single-state solution could work, at least for a few more generations, even if the reconciliation process began today. Oh, I 100% agree with that. That's why I didn't say that it's like an immediate and effective and tomorrow solution. I just think it's the just solution. What is just and what is probable are two entirely different things in the world that we live in today. I know that, for example, socialism is more just. It is more moral as far as economic organizations of society goes. Do I believe that socialism will happen tomorrow? Absolutely not. Do I believe that I will ever see anything that is like even close to teetering on the edge of socialism? Absolutely not. Will I stop advocating for it? No, of course not.
On Sunday, Prime Minister Netanyahu fired his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who had warned that plans to overhaul the judiciary posed a, quote, clear, immediate, and tangible threat to the security of the state. These are the voices of some of the protesters in Tel Aviv this weekend.
Soldiers from the Yom Kippur War. This is an emergency time for the democracy of Israel, and we're all here to fight for the liberal democracy and our rights in the Jewish state, which was established 75 years ago.
A central aspect of the ongoing Nakba is the systematic, ongoing, and arbitrary forced displacement of Palestinians, including what has been described as the ghettoization of the Palestinian population through transfers, confiscation of land, and the concentration and confinement of as many as possible of those remaining in the smallest possible areas of land. Yes. Absolutely. And it's ongoing. It was formational, it was foundational, it was important for the development of the Israeli nation state, and it is continuing to this very day. Which is part of the reason why it's a weird thing to discuss with Israeli citizens, because they have to come to terms with the way that their nation state was built. It's like trying to have a conversation with Americans about the way that the American nation state was built on genocide of indigenous populations and slavery. Okay? What are the protesters protesting specifically? They are not protesting about Palestinians. They are not. This has nothing to do with Palestinians. This is internal conflict within Israel. Okay? This is simply about the Netanyahu government trying to create more power for themselves by undermining the judiciary, undermining the Supreme Court. That's it. As an Israeli, I think you are spreading a lot of misinformation. You keep mentioning how corrupt Netanyahu is and how much of a scumbag he is, but you seem to forget how much worse it is that you play Disco Elysium off stream. Okay, come on, man.
We all have.
No, the worst thing Netanyahu has represented is Philadelphia, okay? Let's be real. That is a permanent L on the apartheid state of Israel, okay? The fact that you can't get rid of a fucking Philadelphia scumbag, okay? Yeah, that's right. Netanyahu is from Philly, okay? Go Birds. Wait, really? Yes, bro. Yes, really. Why do you think he has like a Philly accent when he talks to American media? Where do you think that comes from? Like, yeah, it's very great. I love having my job once again. It's awesome. Now you lying? No, he code switches, bro. Are you kidding me? No, he did. He grew up in Philadelphia. It's not a lie. What the fuck are you talking about? Supreme Court is definitely a problem in Israel. The timing this conversation was ignited in us is very suspicious. What do you mean?
To fight for our rights because of the plans of Benjamin Netanyahu that want to turn this nation into a dictatorship.
What we're doing here tonight is protesting against the government wants to get all the power to itself and take all the rights from our citizens. And this is why we're here, fighting for our democracy.
As hundreds of thousands of Israelis call for preserving democracy in Israel, few are demanding democratic rights for all Palestinians in these protests. We go now to Tel Aviv, where we're joined by Hagai Matar, Executive Director of Plus 972 magazine. Hagai, thank you so much for joining us. There's so much happening and so quickly changing in the streets right now of Israel. Talk about the significance of the mass protest and the firing, Netanyahu's firing of the defense minister.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for having me. This is truly an unprecedented moment, and unprecedented is an understatement. We've never seen such a massive, powerful, committed protest movement in Israeli history. There's really been nothing even to compare it to. Right now, people are demonstrating throughout the country. People are blocking main roads and seaports and so on, with the unions just joining today. I think it's interesting to note, and not a coincidence, speaking of Palestinians, that the reason that kind of really pushed the unions to join, the universities and others, kind of the larger institutions to join the protest movement, is the firing of the defense minister, who said that the steps Netanyahu is taking is threatening Israel's defense. That is still kind of the rallying message for many Israelis for this protest movement. And while the chants are for democracy and for equality, it still feels like for many people it is an internal Jewish conversation. At the same time, I have to say it's incredible and very inspiring to see such a force of people coming out and trying to defend democracy, albeit limited and only for Jews, which is of course no democracy at all, but still the power of it is truly incredible.
So Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister who resigned, it's not as if he didn't support weakening the judiciary as Netanyahu is pushing it through, but explain what he objected to. Also, the consul general, the Israeli consul general here in New York just resigned.
Yes, the Israeli Consul General is liberal from the left. He's kind of a remnant from the previous government, and the fact that he stayed this long is surprising. But for Yoav Gallant, he's really a hawk. He's also a war criminal. He was the responsible general for the war crimes of the cast-led operation in Gaza in 2009. He is no defender of democracy in any way. The only reason he decided to step up against Netanyahu was that the army is basically collapsing. The central and most important units that sustain Israel's Air Force and intelligence corps are basically filled with thousands of people who are saying that they will refuse to continue service or their reserve service if the legal...
What are your thoughts on Arab countries normalizing relations with Israel? They're Gulf states, dude. What do you mean? They're like literally fucking... Brother, Gulf states have almost always historically been led by fucking dipshit ass idiots who are dogs to America anyway, and they bark as loudly as America wants them to bark. They want weapons, they want favorable deals. That's it. That's just how it is. That's how it has always worked. So them being on board them being on board and like normalizing relations with Israel is meaningless. Why is Netanyahu doing this politically? It's a bomb. Whatever legacy he has is ruined. Trash country of Israel. trash the country of Israel, moving towards more apartheid state. He has everything to lose. Is he in condescending Hasanabi was brain broken? Yeah, he said Morocco is not a Gulf state. Okay, Morocco as well. Is that fine? It doesn't matter. Like there are trade partnerships at play. That's it. That's the only reason that these places make these kinds of normalization agreements. It is ultimately just for political posturing internally in the United States of America to make people like Jared Kushner look like they're doing a fucking good job. Okay?
Overhaul goes through. So Gallant, as a former general and a defense minister, says we cannot sustain Israel's defense without an army. The army is collapsing because of these reforms. It's not that I don't support them. We just don't have an army left. So that's where Gallant is coming from. And when Netanyahu's response is not, okay, I'm listening, but actually I'm going to fire you just because you disagree with me, that was kind of the last straw that pushed the unions and other major players into the game.
You say he should have been fired, but he was fired for the wrong reasons, Hagai.
The entire government should be fired, but it's there, and everybody there are playing some part.
Bro, I'm literally talking about fucking what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and dumb motherfuckers in the chat are like, "Yo, Aiden Ross tweeted at you from his." Oh, I don't care, bro. I don't care. Nobody gives a fuck, dude. We're talking about something serious right now. The adults are fucking having a conversation about adult shit. Okay.
Part in different kinds of war crimes, and he is being fired for the wrong reasons. Yes.
So explain what's happening in the West Bank and Gaza right now. I mean, you have this unprecedented mass protest, Histadrut, the unions demanding change and the stopping of what's happening. But how has life changed in the West Bank and Gaza?
So Gaza has been very much the same, under the same siege for over 15 years now. Yeah. Just the same situation, which actually means people's lives continuously deteriorating, but not in any very substantially different way now than they were 1, 2, or 5 years ago. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, we have seen Israel over the past year and a half escalating measures of annexation, of plans for ethnic cleansing, of attacks on Palestinians, which has led to more and more resistance on the side of Palestinians, with the Palestinian Authority basically losing control of entire parts of the West Bank and militants stepping up their attacks on Israelis. And that also has been ongoing since even the previous government and is ongoing and escalating these very days. I think Palestinians also in many ways are just looking at what's happening inside of Israel and waiting to see what plays out and where this is going. This government, which was seen as a stable far-right government with very dangerous plans for Palestinians, might collapse within a matter of days. So Palestinians now just started.
Yeah, literally, like the far-right government formation in Israel was so damaging and devastating to Palestinian existence, more so than prior formations, which was already fucking a threat to the existence of Palestinians, that, like, it's just, like, there's nothing you could do in this situation. You just, like, sit back and watch, Israelis protest the far-right government. The reason why Israelis are protesting the far-right government is because it's becoming more authoritarian towards Israelis. Understand that. They're not protesting because, like, the government has been too authoritarian towards Palestinians. If anything, it's similar to the treatment of Kurds in the Erdogan regime, okay? Anytime some shit pops off internally for domestic reasons, whether it be a corruption charge that is truly never going to get prosecuted, whether it be anything, Erdogan will go and squeeze the Kurdish populations and cause them to cause them to retaliate, and then basically do everything he can to squash that retaliation in the most violent way possible, because it galvanizes everyone. It's a played out tactic. Okay? But it's a very effective one. Israel does the same to Palestinians. The unfortunate reality is that for a lot of people, due to social conditioning, a lot of people in Israel, there is no consideration for Palestinian people as human beings. They are just seen as an aberration. They are seen as people who are, by existing in the same land that they have existed for many, many, many generations, they are a threat to the safety and security of Israel. That is the number one way of thinking about Palestinians in Israel. Okay? So right now, they can't even hit the let's fucking eviscerate and ethnically cleanse the Palestinians button, because they hit it so much, it's not working anymore. Because there are a lot of liberal citizens of Israel who otherwise, in other circumstances, might have genuinely been like, yeah, you're right, actually. Palestinians are the real problem. Let's focus on that. Okay? Are now looking at directly the Israeli government going, no, fuck this shit, dude. What are you doing? Like, you know, you have people who are anti-race mixing. You have people who are insanely illiberal, that are anti-LGBT, okay? Harming Israeli citizens' existence, threatening their existence in this, you know, theocratic ethno-state. I think you give the liberals too much credit. Wait, what? What are you talking about? I'm not giving them too much credit at all. I'm telling you how it is. It's not because like they're worried about Palestinians one way or the other. They're worried about their own existence. That's it. I'm criticizing them from that front because they don't even fucking realize that like the mistreatment and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and displacement, systemic displacement of Palestinians is playing a role in basically solidifying the far-right reactionary fascist government. They are used as a weapon. Their mistreatment is utilized as a weapon, is deployed anytime Netanyahu wants to shut everyone the fuck up. That's it.
The holy month of Ramadan, always a very strenuous time, are basically looking to see where things are going at this moment.
I mean, the parallels with the United States between Netanyahu and Trump, both are under investigation. Netanyahu has been indicted for corruption. Trump is about, it looks like, to be indicted. And both trying to now completely going after the judiciary. In fact, if these judicial changes went through, wouldn't that also benefit Netanyahu personally?
Okay. So this is too liberal of a take. Netanyahu is a more successful fascist than Donald Trump, and is ideologically motivated by fascism more than Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is motivated by self-preservation. Netanyahu is motivated by self-preservation as well, but he has an underlying ideological reason for doing the things that he does. Okay? That's number one. Number two, the United States Supreme Court is already effectively in the hands of hyper capitalists that are going to do whatever the fuck they can, that are going to basically turn a blind eye to criminal oppressive hierarchies, that are going to allow child slavery to continue, all that sort of shit. Whereas the Supreme Court, as far as it goes in Israel for Israelis, okay, Israeli Jews and Israelis in general, not Arab Israelis, but specifically Israelis, okay, non-Arab Israelis, is seen as a safeguard for protecting civil society. Okay? You laugh when I say Arab Israelis, but this is an important distinction to make. What the fuck are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about when I say Arab Israelis. Come on, shut the fuck up. First of all, you're Lebanese, okay? See yourself out of these matters if you're going to have this kind of perspective. That's a very important distinction to make because Arab Israelis also face a different kind of discrimination within Israel. Okay? Arab Israelis are kind of living in like the racist South in modern America, a little bit worse than that. Okay? Whereas Arab Palestinians living in Gaza are living in conditions that is like open world prison. Okay? There are different forms of oppression that each individual group faces. 60% of Israeli Jews favor the forced expulsion of Arabs and Arab Israelis from all of Israel, according to Pew surveys. Yeah, it's very reactionary. What's this Lebanese hate, bro? No, there's no Lebanese hate. I'm just making fun of our Lebanese chatter who's chiming in when I'm talking about an important distinction here. Anyway, it's an important distinction, and yet I think the Supreme Court is a safeguard for them as well, to a certain degree. But ultimately, the Supreme Court is seen as a is seen as a way to prevent further erosion of civil liberties for Israelis in general. Okay? That's it. Do you understand? This is the reason why people are very upset.
Yes, of course, and that is his own personal motivation. There's kind of a cluster of motivations for this attack on the judicial system, and Netanyahu's personal and some other ministers' personal interests for their indictments for corruption are one element. The other elements are plans from the religious parties to promote a clerical agenda, a very extreme agenda of Jewish religion taking over the somewhat secular nature of the country, and plans for forced annexation and forced deportation of Palestinians. All these things are things that the judicial system, which has not been an ally to Palestinians in any way or a defender of human rights in any way, has put in place some checks and balances, and those are the checks and balances around corruption, religion, and annexation that they're trying to dismantle right now. The difference, by the way, between Israel and the U.S. is that Israel doesn't have a constitution and doesn't have any mechanisms to stop this from happening, except from the power of the people that are out in the streets.
And what would happen if the government did collapse? I mean, every hour it's being said that Netanyahu is about to address the nation, though he hasn't.
We are hearing that Netanyahu is very likely in the coming few hours to actually announce a halt to the reforms. He understands that he cannot move forward, that the power against him is greater than he's ever seen before internally. So he will announce a halt most likely. And then the question is what happens next? Will he succeed to still take charge of his government? His coalition is falling apart with the far right saying, if you're stopping the reform, we're going to leave. So it's likely that the coalition will collapse. And then what comes next? The highest chances are for a new sort of coalition between the right and the center, in which they will kind of aim to create a government of healing, so-called, and try to offer some protections to the judicial system and stem the far right, but also protect the essential nature of the state as an apartheid state. That will be kind of off the table, off negotiations. I think the protest movement will accept that. The protest movement will accept that warmly. I think there are questions as to what degree will Palestinians accept that, and to what degree will international allies of Israel that have been very, very concerned with what's been happening, including international finance and big capital that has been pulling away money, divesting from the Israeli economy, to what degree will it be willing to reinvest and re-engage with Israel?
Bro, we'll get to it, okay? Can you fucking calm down? Like, are you okay? Nashville school shooter is trans. Uh-oh. Nashville school shooter confirmed trans woman. Trans shooter alert. Are you okay? You all right, dude? Like, you good?
Without some process with Palestinians, without Israel adopting equality and an end to apartheid as a policy, if the international community accepts Israel under these conditions of yes to apartheid, no to the judicial reform, that will mean that the system will stay basically...
The shooter is transmitted his 8-year-old babe, but the Hawks will fall for it? No, NBC actually confirmed. NBC News, it's still early reports, and there's always misinformation that gets passed along in the situation. So we have to wait. Stop doing this fucking dumb shit. Stop. Take an hour off. I don't even want to fucking see it. That's not what I'm talking about. No. Here. This is why they're saying it. Okay? The shooter was identified as Audrey Hale, 28, of Nashville, according to the chief, who said she identifies as transgender. That's why they're saying it. I think Audrey Hale was a trans man, possibly. Okay? That's it. There might even be a manifesto. We will get to it when we get to it. We will, of course, cover the news as it comes in. Right now, I'm covering something else, okay? As always, whenever there is breaking news, there's a lot of people who fucking turn around and spread information, okay? Whether it be to deliberately spread misinformation or whether it be to cover the news as quickly as possible with genuine needs, okay? This is why I always say we don't have enough information. We don't know. Just like when Matt Walsh was making this inference earlier today, I said that could be the case. But we don't know at this moment. And even if it was the case, it still doesn't change anything. Okay? Anyway, let's continue with what is going on in Israel.
As is, we can only hope and demand.
Yes, we do. The police just confirmed it. Oh my God, I am going to literally take Aiden Ross's alt account rope suggestion right now because of how fucking purposely obtuse or delusional people are. I just pulled a news article that showed, yes, that currently as it stands, that's what the NBC News report is saying. I'm simply stating that it's irrelevant to the point of conversation about gun regulation and gun control. And not only that, but it's irrelevant in this moment because we're covering news about Israel. Okay? Shut the fuck up. We will get to it after.
And that international players hold Israel to account also on apartheid and not only on the recent measures.
Hagai Matar, I want to thank you for being with us, Executive Director of Plus 972 magazine, speaking to us from Tel Aviv.
Anyway.
Called for a night of chaos. And demonstrators by the tens of thousands delivered. Protesters poured onto the streets of Tel Aviv, taking over the main highway, shouting, "Israel is not a dictatorship."
I mean, this is like kind of laughable to say. Like, let's be real. It 100% is a dictatorship when you consider its treatment and mistreatment of Palestinians in general. But they're saying it's not a dictatorship for Israelis.
Blowing air horns, blocking traffic, and burning tires. Riot police deployed water cannon, drenching the crowds.
It's not a matter of left or right. It's a matter of pure, basic human rights that are being crushed daily.
Protests also broke out in Jerusalem, around the Israeli legislative building, and outside the home of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Shouting, "Shame, shame." The eruption came on the back of Netanyahu's firing of his defense minister for breaking ranks with the prime minister's hardline policies. The growing rift in our society is penetrating the Israeli Defense Force and security agency.
Yeah, like he was saying, like this point of contention is making us less secure against the Palestinian plight. Like, you know what I mean? Against the blight. Sorry, not plight. Blight. The Palestinian blight. Pretty much. I'm paraphrasing. But it's basically like that. He's saying, like, you know, we can't secure our borders against those Palestinian terrorists who want to kill us if you keep doing this shit about the Supreme Court.
Said Yoav Gallant. It poses a clear, immediate, and tangible threat to the security of the state. Critics have come down hard on Netanyahu's highly controversial plans to overhaul the judicial system. The proposals would see government control over the appointment of judges, including the Supreme Court, while restricting the court's rights to veto legislation or rule against the government. That's been met with weeks of anti-government protests and nationwide strikes. Unions have gone on strike, shutting down the universities and grounding flights out of Israel's main airport. Another mass demonstration has been called for this afternoon outside of Parliament. Tony?
And of course, if that legislation to overhaul the courts does pass, who gets to look at it? The courts. They could veto it, causing an even deeper crisis. Charlie, thank you very much.
Breaking news out of Israel regarding that planned judicial overhaul from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Back with us is NBC's Ralph Sanchez in Jerusalem. Ralph, what are we learning at this hour?
Well, Jose, in just the last few minutes, a far-right member of Netanyahu's government, Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, has said he is prepared to accept a delay in the judicial overhaul. Now, the reason this matters is Netanyahu has been under a lot of pressure from the right wing of his government, from right-wing protesters like the ones you can see behind me.
Thank God. Guys. That terrorist dog Ben-Gvir said he'll take not even a compromise, but just a pause, a delay. It's good. It's cool, man. Thanks. He's like, look, as long as you allow me. By the way, this is a deliberate thing that Ben-Gvir is doing. He's in charge of security in Jerusalem, which is like such a fucked up thing to do. An additional fuck you by Netanyahu, okay? Right wing to Netanyahu? Yes. Right wing to Netanyahu? Yes. Imagine that. Literal fucking Kahanist terrorists, okay? Like people that America considered too far right for Israel. Like, think about that. Okay? That fucking piece of shit is like, dude, it's okay. You know, I'll take a backseat for now as long as you let me, arm everyone in Jerusalem, every settler in Jerusalem, and like allow us to just murder Palestinians every time we want to murder them without any sort of fucking scrutiny whatsoever, any sort of legal scrutiny whatsoever. Oh yeah, this is funny. It's breaking. Israel on the verge of a civil war between far right and far right, even further right, the furthest right.
To delay this reform. The delay is what those massive protests we've seen on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem have been calling for. And now it appears Ben-Gvir does have a consensus, Netanyahu does now have a consensus inside of his government to delay this reform at least until the summer. So we do not yet have official confirmation from Benjamin Netanyahu that that is indeed the plan, but it looks like that is where it is heading. And we have been waiting all day to hear from the prime minister. There have been these scenes of chaos all across Israel, and yet the Israeli people have not heard from Netanyahu himself. You can see some of the right-wing protesters behind me. So we expect at some point in the coming hours to hear from Netanyahu, and it does now sound like he has the support within his government to back down, at least for now, and delay this very controversial plan to weaken Israel's Supreme Court. Jose?
continuing on with the
now to
government's protesting. I hate to burst everybody's bubble, but Netanyahu is merely postponing the showdown by a month and has signed a document granting Itamar Ben-Gvir, a convicted terror criminal, a private militia. Oh, thank God. Oh, that's awesome. No, just straight. Yeah, Praetorian Guard is right, dude. Holy fuck.
בן-גביר לא מגיע לבד. לאורך כל השנים האלה, מלווה אותו חבורה.
I don't know if this is gonna have fucking, I don't know if this is gonna have like TOS. It probably will. Dude, these guys are, dude, Ben-Gvir is such a fucking freak, dude. If you think, no joke, they're calling it a National Guard. Oh, thank God, you know.
It was 1989. Protests had erupted in Beijing against the Deng regime of China. Images of the protests and the government's response were splashed across TV screens and newspapers.
Ben-Gvir was on national television before Rabin was murdered with his car emblem. Yeah, and he said, literally a week before he was murdered, he said, "We got to his car. Next, we will get to him." And then he got fucking murdered. Ben-Gvir was literally designated as a terrorist by Israel, okay? It's like if Osama bin Laden was like, "No, dog, you're going too far. Let's fucking calm down," to a guy who's like a bigger fucking terrorist, okay? Like, it's insane. Now, that is going to be very frustrating for people as a pill to swallow, okay? People are going to be like, "Dude, what the fuck? How dare you?" Let's say Saddam Hussein then. Is that better? Like, come on. He was not allowed to serve in the military. He now has his own Praetorian Guard, but he was not allowed to serve in the IDF because he was too racist for the IDF. Understand what I'm saying here. In order to be designated designated as a terrorist by Israel, you have to be seriously bad or a Palestinian child. No, I'm saying like as an Israeli to be designated as an Israeli terrorist by the Israeli government, you literally have to be completely unhinged. I'm at the protest. Ben-Gvir is insane. He literally just formed the Israeli version of the SS. It's beyond insane that he has so much support, like a sixth of the population is supporting him. Yeah, the other part of Ben-Gvir's insanity is not just that like he wants to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. That much is clear. He wants to kill Jews too. Like he wants to literally fuck over like liberal Jews too. That's part of the reason why a lot of people are fucking protesting it. Like that's why he's considered a fucking terrorist, okay? It's insanity. And by the way, for those of you who are, new to this kind of thing, it literally is expected. This is how fascist movements end up creating exclusionary, such exclusionary projects that you have to make the in-group smaller and smaller and smaller. This is why we always say fascism is a suicidal ideology, okay? The in-group is going to ultimately move away from Palestinians when they are completely fucking ethnically cleansed, right? When they are ultimately powerless, as they are now, okay? They are going to move in to liberal Jews, liberal Israelis, gay Israelis, Israelis that want to get an abortion, Israelis that want to marry someone who's not Israeli. And then they're going to go back once again, like they did in the original formation, to Israelis that are Ashkenazi Jews. You know what I mean? Because that's the other part of this equation, that like Judaism is an international an ethno-religious identity, which means that there are Jews from all different kinds of backgrounds, okay? And originally, in its formation, in Israel, there were certain Jews from specific backgrounds that were not considered to be as good as the other Jews. That's where you're going to get to. You're going to get Sephardic Jews that are going to be targeted. You're going to have the Mizrahis. You're going to have the fucking... ultimately, you're going to get to... I mean, it's already happening with Ethiopian Jews anyway. And it's going to become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. The in-group always becomes smaller and smaller, okay? That's how it fucking works. We will end the fascist coup if you give us a fascist secret police force. Far-right Otzma Yehudit Party to support freezing coup legislation in exchange for establishing a national guard under Ben Gvir. Fascist terror militia signed and sealed. There you go. All I'm going to say is this, for liberal Israelis that are tuning in, that are watching. This is a byproduct of not having, for lack of a better term, CRT in Israel, okay? That's it. If your national project revolves on doing basically the same shit that, basically the same shit that's currently happening and ongoing, okay? And you turn a blind eye to that, then there are always going to be people that say, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to do more of it. This is a big problem in America as well. It's a major problem in the United States of America as well, with respect to the same attitudes that people have here. Fascists. That's how they do it. They take advantage of blindness that people have to the actual ongoing oppression, ongoing forms of oppression that is normalized in society, and just demand more of the very same. When you hear, for example, Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro talk about police brutality in black communities and say, we need more of this, they're looking at the existing forms of oppression, right? Police being an occupying force in black neighborhoods, and saying that everyone chirping about this is lying, okay, feeding into the blind spot that people have, and then demanding more of it. In some respects, that's precisely what Ben Gvir is doing in Israel, and other far-right ethno-statists are doing in Israel. And they will take away your civil liberties that you have you take for granted.
Newspapers around the globe. The world was fully captivated by this momentous event, and its images have remained some of the most iconic in history. It was this intense and sustained coverage that appeared as an opportunity to others. The same year as Tiananmen Square, a prominent Israeli politician, Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, who had just served as Israel's representative to the United Nations, was speaking to students at Bar Ilan University, where he was quoted as saying, Israel should have exploited the repression of the demonstrations in China, when world attention focused on that country, to carry out mass expulsions among the Arabs of the territories. Regrettably, there was no support for this policy. But that's not entirely correct. Perhaps it was not popular mainstream sentiment at the time, but there were some Israelis who sided with Netanyahu on this issue. In 1981, a Dr. Baruch Goldstein.
Before we get to this, sorry. Look no further than Netanyahu's own attitude towards settler terrorism over his rise to power and continued reinforcement in power. I am old enough to remember that Israel went from, oh no, we shouldn't be bulldozing these fucking houses, to we turned Jerusalem and every other place where Palestinians live into a fucking parking lot, deliberately dissecting their communities and building roads from within their communities with the express purpose of making sure that they are completely decentralized and cannot live their everyday existence, while simultaneously engaging in acts of expulsion and also displacement, mass displacement. They did that. There was a time and place when the Israeli government's official attitude towards settler terrorism was, oh, we're just turning a blind eye to it, but like we don't really like it. It wasn't that the idea would come in with fucking guns drawn and forcibly expel Palestinians from their fucking homes so they can bulldoze it and then build an apartment complex on top of it. Yes, Israeli settlers can carry AR-15s around those neighborhoods, whereas it is illegal to own a firearm as a Palestinian. Yes.
Penned a letter to the editors of the New York Times. Israel must act decisively to remove the Arab minority from within its borders. Years after writing this letter, Goldstein would don his Israeli military uniform and arm himself with his army-issued Galil automatic rifle. He'd then walk into the Ibrahimi Mosque in the old city of Hebron, located in the occupied West Bank. When worshippers bowed their heads to the floor during Islamic prayer, Goldstein unloaded magazine after magazine into the crowd, firing at anything that moved. Hundreds of people would be hit, and in the end, at least 29 were killed in the mosque that day. In Israel, as well as the Palestinian territories, the outrage over this atrocity was immense. It stalled peace talks and created civil unrest among Palestinians. Dozens more would be killed by Israeli forces in the ensuing protests. Many familiar with this event know that the killings themselves aren't the end of the story. Following the massacre, Clyde Haberman of the New York Times would report on the ground from Hebron at Baruch Goldstein's gravesite. The title of the article? Hundreds of Jews gather to honor Hebron killer.
1994, these kinds of atrocities were actually criticized. You know, didn't really mean much, but were criticized at least by the international community. Now it's a part of everyday existence. And, you know, when the state does it, it's a little bit different, right? When the state is engaging in what they call mowing the lawn in Gaza, for example, that is seen as like an act of retaliation. How far we have come from 1994, it's crazy. And even back then, it was insanely violent. Do not misunderstand me. That is also Maggie Haberman's dad who wrote that article. Maggie Haberman is a Nepo baby. Whatever, who cares? Fuck Maggie Haberman. I don't give a shit. The New York Times is full of Nepo babies.
Haberman writes, in a steady stream, they came by the hundreds today to the grave of Baruch Goldstein, many bowing deeply to kiss the tombstone of the Hebron mass killer and to proclaim him a holy man. Many journeyed here by car and bus. Whether young or old, they approached the burial mound, surrounded by stones placed in mourning, as though it were a shrine. Dozens hugged and kissed the tombstone. Some kneeled to kiss the grave itself, including one young man who cried out, "Hero of Israel, hero of Israel, there should be more like him." Haberman continues, while the Israelis who worship the Brooklyn-born Dr. Goldstein are a small minority, the numbers turning out today suggested that they may be more than the minuscule fraction the government claims. Indeed, the support appears to be beyond just nameless civilians. Dov Lior, the chief rabbi of the Kiryat Arba settlement of Hebron, where Baruch Goldstein lived, called him holier than all the martyrs of the Holocaust. The Jerusalem Post described Lior as one of the most high-profile national religious rabbis in the country. As a result of this mass shooting, the Israeli government outlawed the radical Kach party, of which Baruch Goldstein was a member. Another member was a young Itamar Ben.
There it is, Ben Gvir. This man just got his own Gestapo. This man just got his own secret police, literally like a couple hours ago. Part of Netanyahu's far-right coalition government. The reason why he spent 4 minutes describing this shit was because of this man right here, Ben motherfucking Gvir.
Ben-Gvir.
No, not confirmed or proposed. Confirmed. Confirmed. Signed and sealed.
Who joined the party when he was just 16. He would go on to become the party's youth leader. Ben-Gvir remained politically active.
No. You're misunderstanding. Not yet in a couple months. No. Confirmed now so that they would be the far-right coalition government would then say, okay, we're not going to fucking, we're going to allow you to pass the buck down a month into the future for, what do you call it? For pushing the evisceration of the judiciary a month into the future. That's it. That was the conditions. They said they're not going to fucking protest it. The far right is going to allow the Netanyahu government to avoid the top of the hour ad break, which comes at the top of every hour. Obviously, if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe, which you could do for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime, or by getting gifted a sub if you're lucky. Yeah. Yeah, no shame. I know. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. All right, let's continue.
Following the outlawing of Kach, and is now famously the leader of the Otzma Yehudit, or Jewish Power Party. Otzma Yehudit is believed by Israelis to be the
Jewish Power Party.
spiritual successor to the Kach party. Ben-Gvir has a colorful past filled with calls for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. In fact, he was so radical in his politics that he was barred from conscription into the Israeli military. To underscore his devotion to extremism, Ben-Gvir hung a poster of Baruch Goldstein on the wall of his living room. He reportedly took it down in 2019 in an unsuccessful attempt to appease Naftali Bennett, who vetoed his inclusion into his right-wing coalition over the poster. It's not known whether he put it back up afterward. Of course, Ben-Gvir has now become the Minister of Security of the State of Israel, in what is Israel's most right-wing government, possibly in history. At the Otzma Yehudit campaign launch in 2019, Ben-Gvir thanked his spiritual mentor, none other than Dov Lior, and brought him on stage to resounding applause. As Minister of National Security, Ben-Gvir holds one of the most important positions in Bibi Netanyahu's new cabinet. Ben-Gvir has called for harsher crackdowns on Palestinian militants and their supporters, as well as strict curfews in Palestinian villages, and mass deportations and targeted killings of terrorism suspects. Ben-Gvir would also like...
Yeah, terrorism suspect doing, that's a very liberal interpretation. Remember, if you live in occupied West Bank and you travel as a Palestinian, you travel out of it, you might not ever be able to go back to your home, see your children, see your family. They will literally expel you and say, you're gone. It's over. It's a wrap. GG's. Think about that. How fucking nuts is that?
To authorize a shoot-to-kill policy for Palestinians who throw stones at Israelis.
So I did get a 10-minute chill out from chat, lasting almost an hour because I couldn't spend it in here because it's tiring to listen to all this midnight EU just because I asked Hasan, does he think that his views can be wrong sometimes in retrospective? Yes, my views can be wrong sometimes in retrospective, but right now we're talking about like universal principles, you know what I mean?
In these beliefs, he's also joined by the new finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich. Smotrich, leader of the religious Zionist party, is no stranger to controversy himself. In 2021, he told Arab lawmakers in the Knesset that they are in Israel by mistake because founder of Israel David Ben-Gurion didn't, quote, finish the job when expelling the Arabs.
אני איתכם לא מדבר, אנטי-ציונים, תומכי טרור, אויבים. אתם פה בטעות, כי בן גוריון לא גמר את העבודה ולא זרק אתכם ב-48.
This is why I said it's like a little bit more aggressive than America. Like in America, we obviously systematically undermine the existence of black people, right? Or Native Americans all the time. But like, you don't have, I don't know, you have like, what's his fucking face? Stephen King, right? But even Stephen King cannot go out and literally say that to a black politician. Not Stephen King, Steve King, sorry. Not the author. I'm talking about, of course, the congressperson. Like, so in some respects, Israel is like ahead of the game when it comes to like open racism. Like, could you imagine Steve King fucking like going up? I mean, he's a white nationalist. We know he is, right? Like, we know he's a fucking racist, right? Could you imagine him going up in Congress and like pointing to a fucking black politician and just straight up being like, it's an accident that you're here, like you're a slave. You know what I mean? Dude, they're racist fuck against other Jewish people who are darker skinned and not European. Yes, I know. That's what I'm saying. Because, and this is my message to liberal Israelis that are like, Hasan, you're so harsh about this shit. You're so harsh. You're so harsh. Brother, they're coming after you too, motherfucker, eventually. I mean, you know, that's the fascist playbook. That's how this fucking works. They will always look for new enemies. They will always look for new methods of exclusion. They already do that to the Ethiopians. They already do that to the Arabs. Okay? They will eventually go through the different ethnic groups in Israel like they once did in the past. If I'm not mistaken, I thought Sephardic Jews were also considered like lesser than for the longest time, right? Like originally. Yeah, Sephardic Jews were oppressed in Israel for a very long time. Ben Gvir himself, by the way, is, again, if I'm not mistaken, a Sephardic Jew. So what happens to Sephardic Jews when they become a part of the in-group, white, if you will? If you want to use like American terminology, white. What happened? Became more fucking radicalized than anybody else. He's a Middle Eastern Jew. Sorry, yeah, Middle Eastern Jews like Mizrahi Jews. Not even Sephardic Jews. Mizrahi Jews are also oppressed similarly. Yeah. The Black Panthers were an Israeli protest movement of second-generation Jewish immigrants from North Africa and Middle Eastern countries. It was one of the first organizations in Israel with a mission of working for social justice for Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews. Literally. In its original formation, Israel was like, yeah, no Sephardis and no Mizrahi Jews. Like, they were oppressed differently. I did not know about these Jewish ethnic denominations. Yes, it's a little bit more complicated than, it's not as black and white. You can't judge from 1960 people, says King Israel 69. Brother, the reason why I'm bringing this shit up is because this happened once and it's gonna happen again. The entire point is, the entire point that I'm trying to make here is that, like, fascist movements always have to find a new enemy internally. Okay? For Hitler, for example, it was the Übermensch. Hitler did not consider the Slavs to be white, which Slavs are obviously considered white now, almost universally. But also on top of that, even internally within Germany, it wasn't just the Volk. It was always going to move on to the Übermensch, a specific type of Volkish people that were going to be the next group of individual Germans that were actually promoted and prospered. Down to the fucking height. Because you always have to fucking make your in-group smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay? That's it. Because it's built around the concept of exclusion. It's a never-ending battle. This is why I'm saying that, like, you justify it on the one end when it comes to the apartheid conditions for Palestinian people. It's going to come back and bite you in the fucking ass. It is literally doing it right now.
Smotrich and Ben-Gvir will enjoy free reign under Prime Minister Netanyahu, back as premier after a less than 2-year hiatus. As a result, we'll surely be seeing harsher treatment of Palestinians. And what's looking increasingly likely is the outright annexation of the occupied West Bank. Smotrich is insisting that the civil administration of the West Bank be transferred to his finance ministry, a move that is seen by many to be de facto annexation already. By taking the civil administration of the West Bank out of the hands of the military and into civilian control, it will be administered by the federal government of Israel. On top of that, the border police operations of the West Bank will be relinquished to the newly named National Security Ministry, which will in fact be headed by Itamar Ben-Gvir.
All of this happened, by the way.
Along with expanding settlements and annexing the West Bank, Benjamin Netanyahu's history of steady invasions and saturation bombings of Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, will have to be closely watched. And I strongly advise everyone watching this now to prepare for this likely scenario, and to diligently update yourselves on news coming out of Gaza. Remember at the beginning of this video when I read you that Bibi quote saying that he wishes he'd used the Tiananmen Square massacre as an opportunity to expel Arabs from the occupied territories? Be wary of this pattern in the future. Like in 2014, when Bibi launched a ground invasion on the same exact day that Malaysia Flight 17 was shot out of the sky over Ukraine. The moments when news events spike media coverage and drown out other stories is precisely the time that we should be looking into Gaza and the West Bank. I need your help. This channel
How does the shrinking of the circle in fascism relate to the ever-expanding circle of whiteness? In times of comfort, or in times of fear that like your in-group has to expand, you can allow others into the white circle. Like in America, 64% of the country is white. Why? Because the Irish are white, because the Italians are white, because the Polish are white, because the Greeks are white, because the Jews are white. Okay? And you kind of need that, because you can't run the country with just WASPs being white any longer. So you have to expand the concept of whiteness. Okay? This channel is one of my favorites. GDF Official. They make incredible videos. They are criminally underrated. And I'm very fond of them. Love them. Go support them. So. Stop being so dramatic. This sort of thing has happened before without issue. German libs let spicy individuals have broad and exploitable powers in government to calm them down, and things turned out great. Yeah, famously. Things turned out really cool, like really chill right after that happened. You know, there was a little bit of an ideological diversity in the German government. I mean, come on now. Come on, when is a Praetorian, I can't even say it right. Praetorian Guard ever gone wrong? Dude, just call it, it's a National Guard. It's like a national police. I don't understand what you're saying. Just like, it's just Jewish power. It's not white power. The party's called Jewish Power Party. Come on now. Everyone's overreacting. Oh, man. So, yeah. Things are going great. Things are going great in Israel right now. Just great. Now that Netanyahu is also postponed the showdown by a month and then signed a document granting Itamar Ben-Gvir, again, like a literal fucking terrorist. A terrorist by not my standards, okay? Because I think Israel does a lot of things that would be considered terroristic that they do as a part of regular process. He's a terrorist by Israel's standards. I know, Lep, thank you for the